Hello everyone, how's it going? Hope you're doing alright. It's been a while since I last made a video, and what's inspired me to make one this time around is a bit of nostalgia. So if you aren't aware, the Champions League final is fast approaching, and the Champions League, if you don't know, it's a European football, or if you want to call it soccer, competition. And of course right now all across Europe the football leagues are coming to their conclusion, and whenever there's a big final or when the leagues are coming to their end and you're going to see who's the champion, it always kind of piques my interest a bit and makes me feel nostalgic for the time when I used to be a big football fan. I used to be a huge AC Milan fan, and I have memories of watching the Champions League finals of 2003, I believe, when it was an all-Italian cup final, Milan and Juventus. I remember watching matches with my father, and going through the emotional roller coaster that is 90 minutes, or in many cases in Italy's case, 120 minutes of drama, because the matches go into extra time and then penalties and then there's tears, except for 2006 when they finally managed to get a penalty shootout right. And it's just been bringing back memories, and it's always still going to be a part of me, something that I'm interested in. So, who's winning the league? How's the league table looking this year? Who's playing well? But in all honesty, I don't really give a damn about football anymore. And this is a video that I wanted to make a while back, a long time ago, but I never got around to it. But it's about how European football holds a mirror to European society and perfectly reflects in many, many ways what is happening to Western civilization. So let's talk about what are these reflections, and how what is this analogy. So like I said, I used to be a big AC Milan fan, and in the days when I was a fan, the owners of AC Milan were Italians. Silvio Berlusconi was the owner. His right-hand man was Adriano Galliani, and even at one point his daughter Barbara was a part of the club ownership. And the club employed Italian staff, and the players on the pitch were mostly Italians. Great names like Maldini, Ambrosini, Inzaghi, just to name a few. Pirlo, right? If you're a football fan, these names are quite familiar. And there was even more that I could mention, but I'm not going to, rattle off all the names of the Italian players. And in other clubs like AS Roma, the owners were the Sensi family. So, in a way, Italian clubs, Serie A, top division football clubs, were like a family business. Italian families own these clubs, and they are big clubs. They're not like small, local clubs. Big clubs. Well, I don't know. Maybe in the case of AS Roma, you can't really call them a big club, but Milan, okay, Juventus, still owned by the Agnelli family. So these are big clubs. And if you look at what's going on now, though, these are no longer clubs owned by Italians. So let's take the example of Milan and Roma. Since Berlusconi stopped being the owner, sold his ownership of Milan, and since the Sensi family stopped being the owners of Roma, these clubs have gone through many different changes of ownership. They've passed through many different hands, and all of them foreign. So in Milan's case, they were briefly owned by a Chinese billionaire, and it was a total failure. And now they are owned by an American conglomerate called Elliott Management. And if you look in AS Roma's case, after the Sensi family passed on the ownership, they were owned by various Americans, and they are currently owned by the Friedkin Group. And let's go down the list of more Serie A clubs. Inter Milan, Internazionale, currently owned by a Chinese billionaire. They were previously owned by Moratti. I can't remember his first name, but it was another Italian that owned the club. Not anymore. Now it's a Chinese billionaire. And there are other, the Chinese are everywhere. They own a lot of Italian clubs, and that reflects how China owns a lot of Italy in general. China is buying up Italian ports, Italian land, Italian businesses, Italian infrastructure, and this is happening in many countries. So again, football reflects what's happening in society, in the greater culture. Parma FC, this was another club that has always held a special place in my heart. I also just love the town. They're owned by another American conglomerate called the Krauss Group. That's Serie A. I could go on with Serie A. Let's look at the English Premier League. That's even more ridiculous. Here we have Chelsea, famously owned by Roman Abramovich, a Russian Jew, dual citizen with Israel, I believe. Arsenal, owned by an American Jew. Fulham, owned by Pakistani American. Leicester, owned by Thai billionaires. Man City, owned by Arab billionaires. Man United, owned by American Jews. Liverpool, owned by American Jews. Tottenham, owned by Jews, but this time they're actually English. Sheffield, owned by the Saudis. Wolverhampton, owned by Chinese billionaires. And then we could go on into other big clubs like Paris Saint-Germain. They are owned by billionaire Qataris. So this is a reflection, that the way I see it, as how these foreign, and especially certain ethnicity, certain owners, reflect the malevolent politicians. And in many cases now across Europe and in the United States, malevolent politicians that are not of our kin. They are not our kin. Priti Patel, name anyone in the United States Congress these days. Sadiq Khan, all these politicians that are not of our community. They're not of our kin. They're not of our stock. And they are, at many times, malevolent towards us. In the same way that these club owners are malevolent to their fans, and they've totally sold out their club, the fans' club, the community's club, for their own personal profit, just as these politicians do. They sell out their countries, they sell out their cities, the cities of the people, the native population, for their own personal gain, for their own ideological agenda. And recently, there was the case of the Super League. Now, if you are understandably not someone who follows football, the Super League is, or was, this idea, this concept of creating a league of just the biggest, most famous clubs, and there'd be no relegation or promotion. It'd just be basically a big club for them, right? And it wouldn't be based on merit. It's just sort of based on their fame, their reputation, not their actual quality on the pitch, their victories. And I think this reflects the techno-oligarchs, as I like to call them, these rich, omnipotent politicians and elite class, it reflects their megalomania and their delusions of godlike power, that they can just do what they want and form their own little elite stratosphere. And it also reflects the phrase that we were never asked. No one was asked, no fans were asked if they wanted to be in a Super League. And the whole controversy is that the clubs in the Super League would be basically forsaking the traditional European competitions and even their own domestic leagues. So they were basically saying, you know, a big FU to the traditional competitions of Europe, and even, you know, a big FU to the other clubs that aren't so big or aren't so famous, and saying, no, we're just going to do what we want. We're the elite. When we decide what happens here. And by the way, if the fans aren't happy, well, no one cares about them anyway. Now, interestingly, the reaction to the Super League was so negative, and it inspired a reaction, a real reaction from football fans who went to their local stadiums and you know, invaded the grounds, protested, threatened, you know, boycotts and all sorts of things. There's all sorts of action taken. You know, if only we could be stirred to such action for other things that are going on in the world, other mistreatments, other abuses of power. But apparently football is the only one that gets a rise out of the people these days. So yeah, that's one way that football reflects what's going on, because increasingly the West is controlled and owned, you might say, by people who are not of the West, have very little respect for our traditions, very little respect for the fans, you might say, the people, the native populations, and they do what they want, often with impunity. And another way that football reflects what's going on especially in Europe, Western civilization in general, is the dysfunctional diversity of our demographics, of our populations. And this is reflected in things like when a foreign player will come to the club, whatever, let's say it's an English club, right? And he'll score a goal, and then he kisses the badge, right? Yeah, I scored a goal, and I love this club, and he kisses the badge and pounds his chest. And this sort of reflects how there's that thing they like to say, which is, you know, we'll keep using the English football club as an example. So they'll say, I'm just as English as you. All right, so they'll wave their flag, or they'll put the British flag in their Twitter bio or something, right? And they'll say, yeah, I'm just as English as you. David Lammy, for example, is a perfect representation of this. But then the next season, that foreign player will demand a transfer to another club, or will go to another club that is looking to sign him because there's more money in it, or it's a more prestigious club. And this reflects how they always have dual identities. They will always care more about what's good for them, and they'll always have sort of split loyalties, and they'll always have an out if things aren't going the way they want, which is the case with these increasingly foreign populations that like to say that they're just as English as the English, they're just as French as the French, they're just as Italian as the Italians. But really, we all know that they aren't, and they themselves know that they aren't. So this footballer transfers to another club, and he gets more money, and next thing you know, he's scoring a goal and kissing the badge of that shirt. And now he's going to say that, yeah, I'm just as French as you. This reflects the flimsiness of identities these days, the flimsiness of the stolen identities that these people are assuming. And you know, it also reflects that they don't really care what's good for the community or the club, right? If you're the best player at this club and it's thanks to you that they have maybe won a few matches, and now they might even have ambitions of the title or something. And so you start to get a bit of a reputation that you're a good player and you can carry a team. You're a good striker or whatever. Well, fuck the club, right? I want to go somewhere better. I want to make more money. I want another Ferrari. And that kind of reflects the migrant populations that are growing in number. They don't really care if the native populations are not being able to get jobs, having their wages depressed. There's very little social cohesion anymore. There's ethnic conflicts being imported, and the native populations being caught in the crossfire. Need I mention what's going on currently between Palestine and Israel? It's pouring out that conflict in the streets of London. There's been clashes between Palestinians and Israelis in Canada, in America. But these aren't our conflicts, but here it is. And so it kind of reflects how, they don't really care what's good for the club, the community, the nation, the country that they're in, because they'll always have an out and they'll always have another loyalty. And not only foreign players will do this, score a goal, kiss the badge, and then next season demand a transfer. But native players will do this too. A native English player will do this to his English club. An Italian player will do this to an Italian club. And this reflects the hypocrisy and the moral shallowness and greed of white people too, European peoples too. I mentioned earlier the Agnelli family. They are one of the few remaining, Italian owners, Italian families, big Italian family, famous Italian family that still owns Juventus, and they wanted to be a part of the Super Club, the Super League, and it'll reflect the white people who also don't really care about what's going on in the community. They don't care about the rape gangs. They don't care about the lack of social cohesion. They don't care about the working class having their wages depressed, or the fact that there's competition for jobs now that before there wasn't. They could get a job. Now there's diversity quotas, or there's too much competition because of the migrant population that works for lower wages, etc., etc. And many times white people don't care about this too. And many times white people will look for something better. And this might be even something you could say that goes on in our community. Something happens, something bad happens to white people, or we see a country like Sweden, for example, that has all this ridiculous left-wing stuff, and we just say, well, fuck them. That's Sweden's problem. Or white flight. We abandon our neighborhoods, we abandon our communities, and just keep moving, keep escaping to somewhere else, and hoping that they don't come for us there. And so that's one way that even the native population can sort of have a lack of consideration or loyalty to their club. And in this case, the club is their community, their race, their nation. But it's difficult to maintain that when there's so much animosity even coming from your own people, which is the next point. Talking about the hypocrisy. So, for example, English fans, Italian fans, Spanish fans, native populations will say, for example, when a World Cup comes around, that our national team isn't good enough. We don't have what it takes to get to the final or do well this year in this year's European Cup or World Cup, because let's say in this case Italian clubs don't play or don't have enough Italian players, especially in the starting 11. So suddenly these fans are like, Italy first nationalists. They want clubs, the big clubs especially, the important clubs, to play Italian players so that Italian players get elite experience, quality experience on the pitch that they can then utilize in massive international competitions like the World Cup. I totally agree. But if I say that, hey, I also think that the native Italian population should not be replaced by migrant populations that keep coming and keep coming. Just today, just over the past 24 hours, over 2,000 migrants have arrived in Italy. Okay, in one day. If I say that I think the Italian working class shouldn't be exploited, if I say that the Italian economy, the Italian infrastructure shouldn't be sold to the highest bidder, suddenly I'm a Nazi. Okay, so we see this hypocrisy that is reflected by low IQ people, emotional people who just have been told what to think by the media, by Twitter. They don't have a single critical or original thought in their heads. So that's some of the way that's reflected by football, and it always makes me laugh to see that, especially sort of like posh football fans. You'll see this a lot of times on social media. A lot of football fans of particularly Arsenal, Arsenal fans are really, really progressive. They're really liberal, and if you say, yeah, but wouldn't you want more English players in Arsenal so that England can do well in the World Cup? You want to do well in the World Cup. You complain about England not winning a World Cup for so many years, but if someone complains about England becoming, the English becoming the minority in Birmingham, London, if they complain about the English working class being abused or mistreated by the consequences of mass immigration, suddenly you call all those people that are raising those points Nazis and fascists. Yes, what? All right. So let's go on to another way in which football fans also reflect this weird mindset that they have, this emotional thinking, low IQ thinking. They will hate a fellow countryman who plays for a rival club while simping for foreigners who play for theirs. So let's say you have a big rivalry, for example, between, in Italy, for example, Roma and Lazio. It's a very passionate rivalry. And right now, for Lazio, there is an Italian striker who last year was, I think, the top scorer of the league. And he's doing very well, and everyone wants him to do well in the national team. But he's subjected to loads of abuse from the Italians who support Roma, and they hate him because he scores goals against them. And meanwhile, on Roma, in the Roma squad, there's maybe one or two Italians, and their best players are foreigners. And the Roma fans adore these players, and they have them tattooed on their bodies, and they make big portraits that put them on banners that they wave in the stands. And I think this is a reflection of how the liberal left, I guess you could say, if that term means anything anymore, white people will hate their fellow countrymen. They will hate other white people for being conservatives, for being nationalists, for pointing out the negatives, let's say, of immigration or LGBT ideology or whatever. And these liberal white people will truly hate their fellow kin for differences of views. They will dox them, they will threaten them, they will get violent with them. And so I think that's another reflection of how we have these weird loyalties, we have these weird concepts in our head where it's just, a visceral hatred for someone who's of your own flesh and blood, your own kin. He's an Italian striker that's going to later play for the Italian national team. He's going to put on the blue shirt with the Italian flag emblazoned on it, and you're going to cheer for him then, during that 1 month in summer, because he's on the Italian team now, but then when that's over, it's back to hating him because he plays for another club. And then, of course, if he one day transferred to your club, everything would be fine again. You'd welcome him with applause and want to get his autograph. But so maybe we can look forward to the white people that hate us doing that one day. They'll come around and be like, "Yeah, we were wrong. You guys were right. Now we want to be on your team." Okay, and then Some other ways that football reflects what's going on is especially at the national football level, national teams. Especially if you look at the under-21s or the under-17 squads of various national teams. This is a perfect reflection of replacement migration, demographic replacement of the European peoples in their own countries. And it's a perfect reflection of paper nationalities. These new populations, their identity as English, French, Dutch, is just on paper. So if you look right now at the starting 11 of England's U21 or U17 national team, or the French, the Italian, the German, like pause the video, open another window, type in France U21 and images, and you will see, for example, a starting 11 in which 8 of the players are sub-Saharan Africans. 8 out of 11. Type the same for England. I saw a picture in which 7 of the starting 11 were black. And then there might even be Arab, Middle Eastern in there. So it could be, you could say like 8, 9 of the starting 11 aren't English. Italy looks better. I looked for some pictures of Italy. It's 2 or 3 African players, sub-Saharan African players. Netherlands, I saw 7 of the starting 11 were black African. Germany, you'll have a few Arab players, a few Turkish players especially. There's a huge influx of Turks living in Germany, and that's reflected in their football team. There's Turkish players. So this is a perfect, crystal clear reflection of what's going on with European demographics. We are being replaced by new influx of populations, of people from Africa and the Middle East and Asia, and we are being replaced in our own nations, in our own countries. We're being replaced in our own national teams. You can see it in photographic proof. And like I said, the liberal white people who hate us, hate their own kind, they don't seem to care about this. They don't mind. Well, that's fine. They can continue not caring, but at least then admit that you don't care. Admit that you don't care. Stop being intellectually dishonest. And just come out and say that these people are foreign, and that's fine. You don't care, okay? But no, they don't do that. They do this thing where they shift the goalposts, no pun intended, and these people are Schrodinger's Europeans. They are at once just as European as us, like the David Lammy types that think they're just as English as someone who's been on that land, and their families have been on that land, their ancestors have been on that land for 1,000 years. So they're just as European, they're just as English, they're just as French as the native population. And so you can't say anything about the fact that, are they? Because now you're a Nazi. But at the same time, they are, when convenient, not European. And we saw this perfectly displayed by Trevor Noah after France won the 2018 World Cup. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the French national team at the U21 level and U17, U stands for under, by the way, so these are like the youth teams that then become sort of like the new generation, the new crop for the national team that goes on to major competitions like the World Cup. And even the top team, the A team, is mostly sub-Saharan African. The starting 11 has 5 or 6, if I remember correctly, sub-Saharan Africans. And so they win the World Cup. And Trevor Noah, I remember perfectly, I've got a memory for this stuff, I don't forget these things, is on the Daily Show celebrating Africa won the World Cup. Africa won the World Cup. We won the World Cup. Africa won the World Cup. Africa. So now these players are African again. They're not French. So again, it's this paper identity, paper nationality. They've got a passport. Fine. I've got passports too. Okay. Their identity is changeable. Their loyalties are changeable. You see this too, like the African players celebrate by putting on African garb. They aren't French, and they know they aren't French. We know they aren't French, and even the woke liberal left, deep down, knows they aren't French either, because when it's convenient, or when they're not paying attention and the mask slips, they admit it. So those are ways in which I think football is a perfect reflection. It holds a mirror perfectly to what's going on in many ways, in many levels. What's going on in Western civilization, in our culture, in our society, in the way in which certain individuals think about things, the way they opine about things, the way they perceive things or lack thereof. And yeah, this was a video that I just wanted to make many years ago, never got around to, but now that you know, the football season is coming to its dramatic finale, I thought I'd knock it out. So there you go. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.